a Navigator. This is our very first Navigator training of the tax season, so we are so excited to kick it off and just get into it. So I am going to start with a few introductions of the organizations you'll be hearing from today and who we are. So as I am doing that, I would love to also hear where you all are coming from. So if you could in the chat introduce yourself. Roxy just left a comment, so please share your name, your organization, pronouns, and just include the location rather in the chat, because it is so fun to see that folks are joining us from all across the country. I am joining from Maryland. Roxy is joining from DC. Courtney is joining from Colorado. So we are well represented here already. Wow. All right. We're seeing people from Illinois, from Albuquerque, from California, from Indiana. Gosh. Austin, Texas, DC, there are so many cities represented, and we truly love to see it. So to start, I wanted to introduce the two co-host organizations today. Today's training is hosted by the Center on Budget and Code for America. So the Center on Budget is a nonpartisan research and policy institute. We focus on advocating for federal and state policies that are designed to reduce poverty and inequality in equitable and effective ways. So you'll be hearing from the Get It Back team, which is a national effort to connect eligible folks to tax benefits. So we focus on the earned income tax credit, child tax credit, free tax preparation, and other tax benefits. And you can find more information about us at taxoutreach.org. We are so lucky to be co-hosting today's webinar with Code for America. Code for America works shoulder to shoulder with community organizations and government to build digital tools and services to change policies and to improve programs. So to help individuals and families get the flexible cash they need to achieve financial stability, they've launched both getyourrefund.org and getctc.org. So we are so lucky to have partnered with them for several years now and to continue to work with them. So for today, we do have an awesome agenda coming up. So I will be starting. So, oh my gosh, I didn't introduce myself. I am Jenny Fong, Outreach Manager at the Center on Budget. And so I'll be starting with an overview of tax credits. So just a tax credit 101 that focuses on some of the important policy changes that are happening for tax year 2021. After that, Courtney O'Reilly, the wonderful Senior Program Manager at Code for America, will be talking about how to become a navigator and to use Code for America's amazing virtual tools. Then I will share some of the resources that we have to make your outreach work easier. And then we will have some time at the end. Roxy Keynes, our wonderful director at the Center on Budget, will be moderating the questions. So as we present today, please just leave your questions either in the Q&A box or in the chat, and we'll take note of them and ask them at the end. And just because we do get this question a lot, I do also want to mention that we are recording today's training, and the training recording as well as the slides will be available online soon. We will send out the recording and slides as soon as we have that. All right, well, let's just get started then. So to start off, I'm going to quickly cover not so quickly, but I will be covering the EITC, the CTC, the third stimulus check, and the child independent tax credit. So it is an incredibly important tax year this year. So more people than ever will qualify for significant new tax benefits. So for the first time, adults between 19 and 24 rather, and over 65 who do not raise children in the home could get more money from the federal government through the earned income tax credit. So the earned income tax credit is a federal tax credit. It can either provide money back or lower your taxes. And this is so important, especially this year, because so in tax year 2021, the credit is worth up to $6,728 for workers who are raising 3 or more children. And then it is worth over $1,500 for workers not raising children. So that's such an important figure because in the past, this amount for workers who are not raising children was only about $500. So it's about triple the amount that these workers used to be getting. So just an important tax expansion for this year. And so there are really just three important eligibility requirements for the EITC. So that's income, having the right taxpayer ID, and then if you are claiming children, the qualifying child eligibility. So first with the income, to qualify for the EITC, you do need to work and earn an income. Earned income does include wages, salary, tips, employer-based disability, self-employment income, military pay, or union strike benefits. The second eligibility requirement is the taxpayer ID. So the person filing, their spouse, and any children that they are claiming do need to have a social security number that permits work. So unfortunately, you cannot claim the EITC if you file taxes with an ITIN. And then the third part of that is, so for people who are claiming children, so as you saw earlier, the amount that you get in the EITC is different for if you claim children or not. So there are some rules for which children you can claim. And for that, there's really just a few elements there as well. So the first part of that is that the child must have a certain relationship to you. So they must be your son, daughter, grandchild, stepchild, or adopted child, or a younger sibling, younger step sibling, younger half sibling, or their descendant, or they must be a foster child placed with you by a government agency. The second component to claiming a qualifying child is their age. So they must be under 19 or under 24 if they are a full-time student. And if they are totally and permanently disabled, then they can be any age. And then finally, the child must live with you in the US for more than half the year. However, this time does not have to be consecutive. So it doesn't have to be 6 months in a row. So of course, there are really important expansions for this particular tax year, so tax year 2021. So the first thing is that this, as I mentioned before, this tax credit has been expanded for workers not raising children. So in the past, if you were between 19 and 24 or over 65, you could not claim the EITC unless you were raising children, right? So now you can. However, there are a couple limitations to that. So if you are between 19 and 23, you cannot be a full-time or part-time student for more than 5 months in 2021. The exception to that rule is that if you are in at least 18 and you are homeless or former foster youth, then you can be a student, and you can qualify even at 18. And then the third thing around this newly eligible population is that the credit value, as I mentioned before, has tripled. So it previously was worth up to $538, and now it's worth over $1,500, which is a huge improvement. The second new thing about the EITC, relatively new because it was available last year too, is that there is a look back that has been passed. So if your income in 2021 was less, if you earned less money than 2019, you can use either your 2021 income or your 2019 income to calculate the EITC. And then you would just need to choose the year that gives you the bigger refund. And then finally, the third major change that, well, there's a few other changes, but the third change we want to touch on right now is that if you do have a qualifying child who does not have an SSN, you can now still claim the EITC for workers without children. So you could still get the EITC. And then there are just a few other expansions that are also important, of course, but not as much of our priority, but also important. So if you are married filing separately, you still may be able to claim the EITC. In the past, you could not. If you live with a child for 6 months and you do not live with a spouse during the last 6 months of the year and have an or have an agreement with the spouse and you do not live together. So that's another way to get the EITC. The investment income was also increased this year. And then finally, luckily, the EITC is now available to folks living in U.S. Commonwealth or territories. So this includes Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, and American Samoa. So that is really exciting. So next, I'm going to quickly talk about the child tax credit, also an important expansion. So the child tax credit is a federal tax credit. It's really intended to help with the cost of raising children. So in 2021, tax year 2021, this credit is worth up to $3,600 if your child is less than 6, and then $3,000 if your child is between 6 and 17 years of age. Like the EITC, there are 3 eligibility requirements to getting the child tax credit. So first is around income. So there is, at least for this expansion year, there is no minimum income requirement. So you can earn $0 and still get the child tax credit. It does phase out at the income limits listed below, but if you don't earn money, you can still get the credit. The second eligibility requirement is around the taxpayer ID. So the parent or guardian must have either an SSN or a taxpayer ID number, so an ITIN. And then the last part of it is around the qualifying child. So for the qualifying child, there are a few elements to qualify. So like the EITC, the child must be your son, daughter, grandchild, stepchild, or adopted child, younger sibling, step-sibling, half-sibling, or their descendant, or a foster child placed with you by a government agency. The second requirement, also like the EITC, is the child must live with you in the US for more than half the year. Again, the time living together does not have to be consecutive. Unlike the EITC, there is an exception. So for non-custodial parents who are permitted by the custodial parent to claim the child as a dependent, there's a waiver that you can sign, an agreement that you can come to. And then finally, on this slide at least, the child must be 17 or under on December 31st, 2021. And then a few more items here. So the child, even though the taxpayer does not have to have an SSN, they can have an SSN or an ITIN, the child does need to have a valid SSN to qualify. And then the child cannot provide more than half of their own support, and they must be considered a dependent for tax filing purposes. And then wanted to, of course, share what the expansions were for the CTC. So many of you have already worked with the advance payments. So of course, in 2021, the IRS did issue half of the credit through advance monthly payments. And so in order to get the second half of the payment, folks need to file their 2021 taxes to get the rest in a lump sum. So of course, if you didn't get the advance payments, it's not too late to get the full tax return. You just need to file a tax return for 2021, and then you'll get the full sum. So this expansion was a lot more money than it was previously. Previously, it was $2,000 per child, and now it's almost double that. And previously there was a minimum earning requirement. You had to earn at least $2,500 to get the CTC. Another important element is the repayment protection. So for families, for people earning less money, the IRS does not require you to repay if you were overpaid, basically. So if you earned less than $40,000 as a single filer, $50,000 as head of household, or $60,000 as married filing jointly, you do not need to repay the CTC if it was made, if it was an overpayment. And then finally, the last thing that's important to note is just that the IRS did send out letter 6419 that shows the amount of CTC payments that you got for the year. And so that letter and that amount is important for reconciling the CTC on your 2021 taxes. And Courtney will be talking a little bit more about that later. All right, so now that we've covered the two big tax credits, wanted to quickly mention the stimulus check, the third stimulus check as well. So during the pandemic, the ongoing pandemic, the Congress has passed several, 3 stimulus checks to help reduce the financial burden of COVID-19. And the third stimulus check was worth $1,400 for each eligible adult and their qualifying dependents. So the good thing about this credit is that if for folks who did not get their third stimulus check in 2021, or if they got part of their stimulus check, they can still claim the rest of the stimulus check as a recovery rebate credit when they file their 2021 tax return. And so they can use letter 6475 to see how much of the third stimulus check they already got in order to get the rest of that credit. And so there are 4 eligibility requirements for the third stimulus check. The first is that there's actually no income requirement, which is great. You don't have to earn any income to get the credit, though the stimulus check does phase out at higher incomes. The second is that any family member or dependent that has an SSN can receive the stimulus check. The third is that if you are the tax filer, you cannot be someone else's dependent. And then the fourth is that you must be a U.S. citizen, permanent resident, or qualifying resident alien to get the credit. And then finally, in terms of credits, I'm going to quickly cover the child independent care credit. So this is a tax credit that helps families pay for expenses for child or adult care for when they need it to work or look for work. And so this credit is worth up to $4,000 for one child under the age of 13. And it can be up to $8,000 for 2 or more children under the age of 13. So the credit amount really depends on a number of factors, including number of dependents in the care, your family's income, and the amount paid for child or dependent care during the year. And so this expansion, what's important about this is that this credit amount was increased by a lot. So it previously was up to $3,000 for one child and up to $6,000 for 2 or more children. And previously it was not refundable. So if you didn't earn a lot of money, didn't owe a lot of taxes, you weren't getting any back in your refund. So the refundability is really important for this tax year. And like the EITC and CTC, these changes are currently only for one tax year. So again, 3 eligibility requirements. One is that you paid for care in 2021 for either a qualifying child or dependent who lived with your family for more than half the year. 2 is that you needed that care in order to either work or look for work. And then 3 is that you spent less for dependent care during 2021 than your total income for the year. All right, so with that, I am going to pass it over to the lovely Courtney O'Reilly, who will be taking us through Get Your Refund services and how you can be a navigator.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jenny. Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Courtney O'Reilly. I'm with Code for America. And today I'll be talking a little bit about the services we're offering and hopefully more importantly, how you can help connect clients to these services. And so next slide. This year, Code for America is offering a whole host of services to help clients access their tax benefits for free. And I want to spend some time to make sure you're walking away understanding what those services are and who they're for. And so I know this slide can be a bit overwhelming, but just know that this will be available for you to print afterwards and have with you. So don't feel like anything I really am mentioning today is something you have to memorize, because I know this can be a little bit overwhelming. But for purposes of this training, we're going to go step by step through these services, starting with our Get Your Refund full service virtual option. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Code for America, Get Your Refund was actually our pilot program into the tax benefit space. This was a way that we saw helping Vita connect with partners or clients virtually to make sure that just because of a location or time, they're not limited in who they can serve. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Get Your Refund process, I just want to quickly call it out, and it helps explain some of the stuff that's on the left-hand side. So the first is that clients complete the Get Your Refund application and upload pictures of their ID and tax documents. Once that information is completed, that's then routed to a partnering Vita program. Once that Vita program has had the chance to go through it, everything looks right, we have everything we need, that Vita partner then sets up an intake call to make sure that they can ask follow-up questions, collect any information that wasn't collected at the time of the application, so that they know that they can prepare a return accurately and make sure they're getting them all of the benefits available. And so after that intake call, the return is prepared by a volunteer and reviewed by a second volunteer. After the second volunteer reviews that return, there's a second call with the client to make sure that they understand what's on the tax return and what they're agreeing to if they choose to file with us. After that call, they'll be able to e-sign their return, and then that return is sent to the IRS and their state agency. Given that process, a couple of other things to note: that this service is available to anybody who makes less than $66,000 a year. Vita is able to help with the current tax year and 3 years back. By filing a full tax return, you qualify for all of the benefits that Jenny already went through, in addition to any state credits that you may be eligible for. In order to get through this process, there are a couple of requirements that some taxpayers might be surprised by. And the first is they need to be able to show photos of their IDs and Social Security or ITIN paperwork for every member of their household. In addition, obviously, photos of all of their tax documents that should be filed with that tax return. The length of time can vary, but generally speaking, when the site is fully up and running and going through things with scheduling 2 phone calls, preparing the return, all of that, it can end up taking 2 to 3 weeks to complete the process. A couple of other considerations. Well, one, this is going to be an IRS certified Vita tax team that is actually preparing the tax return. They can help with ITIN applications, and there are some additional resources to helping clients access any required documents in a virtual way. There are some additional scope limitations for Vita, which is true for in-person or virtual. So that's our virtual model. The next service that we offer, and it's not really a service, it's more of just a tool, and that's the Vita Site Locator. So many of you may be familiar with the IRS Vita Site Locator. We actually use the same information from their website, but put it on our website so that it can be a little bit more mobile friendly. This is where if somebody isn't able to complete the process virtually, wants to go in and have a person-to-person experience, this is a good tool for them. When using the tool, I pulled out these screenshots because I see so many people just stop at the first page and say, like, great, there's a tax site near me. And then they just go to that address and find out that the site isn't operating at the specific time that they drove to that address. So just making sure if you're helping somebody use this tool to actually click on it to learn more information. For Vita programs, the household income limit is typically under $58,000 a year, although it can vary slightly program to program. But generally speaking, all of the other requirements I just went over with virtual Vita applies for in-person Vita. So you can claim all of the tax credits on federal and state, same required information. The length of time depends on that Vita program and what service they're offering. So the in-person lookup tool may account for what I call traditional Vita, where the return is prepared in front of the client and it is finished that day. Or it can be a drop-off or a valet site where they just take the information, do the intake process, the taxpayer leaves and then returns at a specific time to pick up their completed return, or any other kind of variation of those two options. With this, again, pretty much similar considerations. The Irs certified Vita tax team is the one that's actually preparing the tax return. And then moving on to our next service, the File Myself. So this has been referred to as facilitated self-assistance, DIY, but basically they're completing their own tax return on their own with some assistance when necessary. So when choosing this option, they'll be sent to a free tax filing software, TaxSlayer for this year. And when they are on there, they can return to get your refund to use our chat feature to get additional assistance. But for the most part, this is going to be the one that has unlimited capacity, which is why I'm going to stress how you can help people access this. Capacity is a constraint for most Vita programs. By using File Myself, we can hopefully get the right people using this service to file their own tax return. The household income limit for this service is a little bit higher than what we had discussed for the other two services. So it's anybody making under $73,000. One of the caveats with this is that you can only file the current tax year. You can claim all eligible tax credits and benefits for that tax year, but again, it's only going to be for 2021. The required information is slightly different when you file yourself. So of course, you still need all of your tax documents in order to prepare a tax return. But instead of having to show a copy of a social security card or ID, you have to just know the numbers. And then the way that it verifies their identity is through the adjusted gross income of their last year's tax return. If they didn't file last year, that's okay. There's an option to say, I didn't file last year. Generally speaking, the length of time to finishing this process is about 45 minutes to an hour. I know My Free Taxes has put out a tremendous amount of information on this, just how quickly most people are able to get through this process. So think of this as probably the fastest option to claim all of the tax credits available. Again, we want to emphasize that there is support for people who are unsure of certain, just very specific questions related to one of the tax credits or their filing situation. And we have IRS certified volunteers staffing our chat support at Get Your Refund. One other thing I just want to bring up is that the software is formatted for smartphones, but computers are definitely preferred. When you're typing in that much information, it's just a little bit easier when you have a computer or tablet rather than going screen by screen on your phone. Perfect, and moving on to our last service. So for many of you, the first time you partnered with Code for America might have been this last tax season when we launched Get CTC, which helped clients file a very simplified tax return to claim their missed stimulus payments and advanced child tax credit payments. This year, that we're referring to that as Express, but want to call out that that will not launch until late April, but more likely May at the earliest. This service is very fast. It takes about 15 minutes. The household income limit is under $25,000 if filing married, filing jointly. Basically, you don't have a filing requirement, allows you to access this service. But you are only able to claim the child tax credit and your third stimulus payment. So that's really important to note that simplified filing, while easy and fast, it only is going to get you your child tax credit and third stimulus payment. The only required information you need are your social security numbers or ITINs. Again, you don't need a copy of your social security card or ITIN in order to complete the process. And last year, we found that most people were able to file in 15 minutes or less. Some other considerations when thinking about Express, knowing that it doesn't open up until later this spring, sometime in May. For some households, it may not be a good option for them to wait to file that long in case their dependent may be claimed by somebody else, or that they may be eligible for other tax benefits. With that, I can move on. So it's important, and something we've been thinking a lot about internally, is how do we get clients to access the right service? If you go to Get Your Refund right now, we have a very simple sort of triage that we're using. Something you should know about Code for America with basically any of our products is that we are an iterative organization. We like to test things, learn from it, make changes, learn from it, make more changes to try to find the right formula of how to help people in the most effective way possible. And so right now we have a very simple process of trying to get people to different services, and it's entirely based on income. Because of the demand of Vita programs and that really hands-on service, we are prioritizing lower income individuals for the virtual Vita option. We're also giving them the option to sign up for an update of when that express or simplified filing will be available. People who are making a little bit more will be also pushed to the File Myself option so that they can get started today and get through the process of filing their own return. And just so you're aware, anybody over $73,000 does not qualify for any of these services, and they'll get a page that explains that and sends them to an FAQ page about what the services, who the services are for. While that's happening right now, we will soon be making some changes so that there will be just a couple of questions that help determine what are all the eligible services somebody qualifies for. We'll still be prioritizing lower income households so that they can get the assistance they need. But we want to make sure that people are aware of all the possible services that they may qualify for with some of those key considerations we already went over. So reminding people that express filing will not be available until May and only will let somebody claim the child tax credit and EIP, that virtual Vita might take 2 to 3 weeks and they're going to need some of those documents, things like that. We want to make sure that we're transparent about some of the opportunities and challenges with each of these services. And then later, Get Your Refund will also have on its landing page an active choice page. This active choice page will help clients understand sort of that chart that I showed you earlier of what are all the services, when are they available, and who are they available to, so that somebody can opt in to which service they want and need. Again, just to emphasize, we will continue to iterate. As we learn more information, we strive to make our products more useful and beneficial to our clients. So don't be surprised if all of a sudden there's a different question or slightly modified questions. It's part of our practice. One thing I want to call out, because I know I saw just in the registration list that we do have a number of Vita partners who joined us. If you're wondering what the heck does this mean with this income, I'm a Vita partner. Just understand that when you use your Vita unique URL, you bypass those initial triage questions so that they can be routed directly to you. So just want to call that out. And next slide. I know I just went through a lot of information, but I want to take a moment just to pause to talk about some outreach strategies and some questions we've been getting about how to do some outreach to what we term new or intermittent filers. A lot of you call them non-filers. We see some problems with referring to somebody as a non-filer when they are in fact filing a tax return. But that's for a different day and a different argument. So when thinking about how to reach out to some of these newer intermittent filers or people who don't necessarily have a filing requirement, we of course want to push that filing a full tax return is the best way to access all eligible benefits. So if somebody has earned income at all, we know there's a plethora of other credits that may be available by filing a full tax return. And so we want to make sure that they understand the resources and how they can access filing a full tax return. However, in our years of doing this work, we know that with full service filing, outreach alone simply is not enough. Many clients will need additional assistance to file that full tax return. And so part of the reason we're here today is to talk about how to expand those services through assistance, Navigator programs, all of these other things. But just recognize when you're doing this massive amount of outreach, many of the clients won't be able to do this alone. On the flip side, with express filing, we were pleasantly surprised with Get CTC that outreach may be enough, that sending somebody a prompt, a nudge, a reminder that they qualify for these credits and they have access to a simplified tool, they can actually get through the process fairly quickly and on their own. 99% of Get CTC filers did not need any additional assistance completing that process. They may have needed assistance because a simplified tool wasn't right for them, but that's, again, just a different conversation. So when you're thinking about reaching out to these filers, just recognizing that by reaching out to zero to little income families, they may feel very disgruntled by the hurdles of filing a full tax return, trying to find that find a social security card for every member of their household, the documents when they've moved several times in the last few years and haven't received any of their W-2s. Things like that might make them aggravated and frustrated with the process when simplified filing might be the best option for them. Yes, we know they won't get all of their credits, but if they can claim some of their credits, we think that's a win in general. So it's worth letting some people know that if you're pushing full service filing and it is not working for them, making sure that they understand there's a different option for them if they don't have a filing requirement and if they can't get through that full service process. I know this is sort of confusing and nuanced, and there's a lot of conversations about how to do this well. It is stuff we are grappling with, but we're excited to be working with partners like you to try to find the right balance of pushing people to file a full tax return with understanding and accepting that some people are not going to be able to get through that process. That's my tangent about that. Something just because we identified how useful this was. When you are doing outreach, something we learned from Get CTC and that is highlighted in our executive summary report that I'm happy to put in a link in the chat so you can see sort of all of our findings from simplified filing. But one of the things I wanted to mention was don't overthink the messaging. Existing toolkits like the Get It Back campaign and GMMB have already done a lot of work to try to create resources and information that are compelling and follow all of the different pieces that we've identified as good messaging. I've listed a few of the things that do come up just so that everybody is aware. So talking about payments or cash benefits resonates more than tax credits. A couple of other things is psychological ownership. Considering addressing some of the common misconceptions, something we saw that was really useful was available even if you earn little or no money and don't usually file a tax return. But also, it's really important while we give all of these things to also be concise. Keep your message short and to the point. Again, don't feel like you have to create spend a lot of time in thinking through what is the right way to message this. If you haven't gone through that work yet, please use Get It Back Campaign's toolkit. It is filled with a lot of really great messaging that can help get the point, and you can use your resources more effectively in other areas. And with that, so now that you hopefully have a better idea of what services are available and what tax credits are available, we want to discuss how you can help clients access their benefits. And the way I approach how to talk about this was what types of challenges, pain points, and barriers are clients facing when trying to access these services, and how can you offer an intervention that helps them get over that? So first, there's just deciding to file and how clients become aware of filing and some of the things to be aware of. So some challenges and barriers are just some misconceptions about filing. I've never filed before because I don't qualify for any of those benefits. I'm worried that if I filed now, the IRS is going to wonder why I haven't filed for a number of years, all of those things. Through your outreach, awareness, and trust building programs, you can really help explain and provide some trust around the process. They might also just be unsure how to file. I've never filed before. I don't know how to file. Am I responsible for filing? Is somebody going to help me? You can use the Get Your Refund service chart to help them figure out what is the right service for them and the level of support that they need. One of the big ones, as I've probably alluded to in some of the descriptions of the pros and cons of each service, is that many clients face challenges in accessing some of their required documents. So for most of the filing services that we offer, clients will need to get access to their tax documents. They'll need to know how much of their advanced child tax credit payments they received, and if they received any and how much of their third stimulus payment. A huge piece of this or a huge way that you could be helpful is helping clients acquire those documents. So you can utilize a tax document checklist to help clients know what types of documents they may have received, which ones are required, and which ones are just something that's helpful to them. So for example, in my previous life with Vita, I encountered so many people who waited to get their last property tax statement when, quite frankly, that didn't really do anything on their tax return, but they waited and they agonized over getting this in order to file. And so by using a simple checklist, you'll be able to kind of help them think through what are the things you absolutely need versus what are the things that might be helpful, but is not necessary. The other big piece, and I'm so happy that there are so many wonderful outreach partners that are already spreading this message, but this year is the first year where clients, because of the advanced child tax credit payments that were received between July and December of last year, we now have to reconcile those payments when we file our tax returns. And it's important that the clients get the exact amount that they received in order for their returns to be processed in a meaningful time. So the best way to do that is using the letter that was mailed to clients in early January. I think some of them started going out in late December, but basically earlier this year. That shows the full amount that they received. That amount then needs to be put onto their tax return. If for any reason they either don't have that letter or they disagree with the amounts, the next best thing to do is to get them onto the IRS account. There is an ID.me process of verifying their identity in order to create an IRS account and access that information. Having your assistants walking through it is going to be a momentous assistance for the clients trying to access this information. Once they have that information, they also need to make sure that they know exactly how much they received in their stimulus payments. So there was, again, a letter sent out explaining how much they should have received from that third stimulus payment. If not, Irs Account would be another good resource. One other common document that was missing from this, it's not required for everybody, but this was a common holdup for most people, was how to access their current identity protection PIN if they've been assigned one. They could have been assigned one because they experienced identity theft in the past, because they opted into the program. We encountered a lot of people who weren't even sure they had an identity protection PIN or why they had an identity protection PIN, and helping them get onto the IRS website or access tools in order to retrieve that is key, in making sure that they can file a tax return and have it processed quickly. Then moving on. So after you've helped them through the decision to file, there are a couple of different ways you can help them through each of our services. I want to stop and just mention that I am listing every possible way you can help. In no way do I expect any one organization to do all of these things. So as you're thinking, I just encourage you to stop if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed of saying, I don't know if I'll ever feel comfortable giving this assistance. I don't think we have the option of doing some of these things. This is not a all or nothing type of assistance. This is what are you prepared to do, and how do we help get that in the hands of the folks who you're trying to serve. With that, if you are going to be able to help somebody through the Get Your Refund virtual Vita process, the common challenges or barriers that we've seen from clients is some fear around using an online tool, and in my opinion, some healthy skepticism. When they are asked to upload a picture of their social security card, I almost felt a little restored in and some faith in some of my clients when they called me asking, are you kidding? Am I really supposed to trust that I should upload this picture? Yes, we have done all of the work to keep that information safe and secure. And so just making sure that they're aware that this is not a scam, this is something that they should trust, is incredibly helpful for people accessing this resource. Again, accessing tax and ID documents, I already mentioned a few of those pieces, but some additional things that apply to just Get Your Refund is requesting a replacement social security card or showing steps on how to renew an ID. Because clients need to show that information, they may have not seen their social security card for years. There are steps in place to request a replacement one, and they may just need some additional hand-holding to get through that process. In addition, just getting through the Get Your Refund questions is something that you can help with. And a lot of that just comes down to giving folks access to Wi-Fi or a tablet, a computer, whatever you have. They may just not have access to that, and you can do that for them. Helping them upload clear pictures of their documents. Again, as a previous Get Your Refund Vita partner, I can't say enough how wonderful it was when a site helped people upload those pictures versus the blurry, out of focus, half W2 that we'd get 3 different shots at different angles. Having one clean, clear view of their W2 was it was magical, and you can help do that. And this is another key one of helping somebody through the Get Your Refund process, is helping explain what comes next. So they've done this, they've submitted their application, they've submitted pictures of really sensitive documents. What should they be expecting? And a lot of it's making them aware of that they're going to need to participate in 2 phone calls to finish this process. That this could take 2 to 3 weeks, because I know we encountered a lot of people that tried this for the first time last year that thought they did everything online, great, it's done, nothing else to do, only to find out that there was other commitments that they had to participate in to finish the process. With that, next slide. How to help somebody access in-person Vita sites. So this one's probably the easiest one, as far as some of the barriers are just understanding where they can find a tax site that fits their schedule and needs. You can help them access our tax site lookup tool and explaining that they need to open each of the tax sites to know if appointments are required, if they're operating on certain times or certain days of the week, if this is just one special event that they need to make sure to show up on that specific date. They may have a hard time making that appointment. So if it's an online appointment tool, how can you help them make that appointment and give them a reminder of when that appointment is? again, accessing those tax and ID documents. I can't stress enough, just about every bit of the process is helping somebody get that information. And then just setting expectations. If this is a traditional tax site, what is the wait time going to be like? I love when people would come to our full service sites with a book so that they knew that there was a little bit of wait involved in order to get help. One way to make this even more effective is to get a list of your local Vita sites. So that might just be printing a copy of the Vita sites that are listed on our website or the IRS website. It might be contacting some local Vita programs or outreach programs to better understand what their services are, what their capacity is. This is above and beyond, but it could be really helpful in making sure when you are referring a client to a certain tax site, what is the capacity like? What's the service there? What are some expectations you can do to ensure success of that client using that service? And next slide, just checking my time. So file myself. I'm just going to admit, this is the one I am going to be pushing the hardest for. As far as, because there are no capacity constraints and because of some prior experience I've had in encouraging people to file their own tax return, I think this is the place we can do the most in trying to empower the people we're trying to serve to file their own tax return. So the largest challenge or barrier that needs to be overcome is just the fear of filing their tax return. If you can create a space where somebody can come in, sit down on a computer and just tell them, let's give this a try. That was my biggest piece of advice when we would run what we called at that time do-it-yourself sites. People would come in, we had a computer lab at a library. They were a little upset. They thought I was going to be doing their taxes for them. And I was like, you know what, I know this isn't the service you thought it was going to be, but you know what, spend 20 minutes on this, see if it works for you. And if not, then we're in the same place we were before. The big thing after getting over some of that initial fear, again, just accessing tax and AGI information. So we know that there's all the tax documents that they need for full service filing, but the difference with File Myself, instead of uploading a picture of your social security card, the way you're asked to identify or verify your identity is by listing last year's adjusted gross income. There's also a PIN that they could put in if they remember what PIN they used when filing a tax return, but for most people, it's going to be their adjusted gross income. So the best way to do this is by getting a copy of their tax return. They can also go to their IRS account to get a transcript of their return that will show it. If they use the simplified or non-filer tool from last year, their AGI is essentially $1. And so helping them through that could be the difference between being successful in filing a tax return and giving up and not filing that tax return. One thing that I'd love to see from community groups that have a computer lab or have access to computers is opening up your space specifically for this purpose. Most people don't have access to a home computer, nor do they have the time and the space to comfortably prepare their taxes. One hurdle that we encountered when working with a local library was that their computers had time limits on them for, obvious reasons. You don't want somebody stuck or at the same computer when many people need to use that computer. But by designating a specific time that people could come in and do this and waiving that time requirement can make a huge difference for people who just want to take their time and get through this. In addition to reserving space for that purpose, just keeping them reassured, take your time, just take all the time you need in order to file an accurate return. You can also do things like pull up, get your refund chat support. As I said, with the File Myself option, you are going to be pushed to a different software in order to file that tax return. But by continuing to keep up, get your refund and that chat support icon, you are not responsible for answering any tax questions, nor should you be. We have staff and volunteers who are certified to be able to answer those questions, and we encourage people to use that chat support. We also will have a File Myself guide that walks through some of the basic questions and screens that people will see to help reassure them that you're doing everything right, this is how you do it. I think one of my main, thanks, Jen. One of my main things when I was at the FSA site, or the do-it-yourself site, even though I had tax certification and I could answer tax questions, Most of the time, the questions I received were more technical based of, it says that I need to click next, but I don't see next. And it's telling somebody to scroll down on their screen to see the next button, or just reminding them that they should be taking their time. One thing I do want to say is you should not be giving tax advice if you are not tax certified. Use the chat support, only give technical advice. And with that, we can move on. Once Express becomes available, and that's kind of the first barrier, is waiting for it to become available. And that's when you can share some of the other options that we already went through. But the other thing, because as I said, Express is actually fairly simple for people to get through. 99% of clients did not need any additional assistance. What they did need assistance with was issues that could not be resolved by simplified filing. So commonly, dependents were already claimed on another return, or they came in because they just wanted to update their information. Express is still filing a very simple tax return, and only one tax return can be filed a year. If they need to make changes, that's an amended return that can't be handled through Express. And so I think just helping explain what Express can and can't do is a meaningful piece of this. As we get closer to when Express becomes available, we will share other learnings and ideas of how you can offer assistance. And as I said, we put out a summary of our findings through Get CTC, which include different types of assistance and outreach that had some promising practices. And I'll share a link to that in the chat. And with that, next. So after you've helped somebody through the filing process, or even if you didn't help them through the filing process, there are still challenges that folks face after they filed a tax return that you can provide a tremendous amount of assistance through. So the first is they may have filed and received a rejected return. If they filed using a Vita program or the virtual Vita at Get Your Refund, those Vita volunteers are going to be able to help somebody through resolving a rejected return. But if they used File Myself or Express Filing, there may be a lot of additional questions that somebody has. It's not up yet, but we will have an FAQ page that has some of the most common rejects and some next steps, some more information that's out of the IRS jargon and hopefully in a little bit simpler terms. So we encourage you to share those rejected return FAQ pages when somebody comes in with those questions. Another way you can help with rejected returns, there are some returns that cannot be resolved electronically. It might be that, like I'm going to say over and over again, if a dependent has already been claimed on somebody else's tax return, that cannot be resolved electronically, at least currently. And so what they may have to do is print and mail in their tax return for a pretty lengthy process of the IRS opening up an investigation to determine who is the rightful person to claim that child. You can help print and organize the return to be paper filed. Many people don't have access to a printer, and so that might make all of the difference. The additional challenge is just waiting for their refund. So they filed a return, it's been accepted, great. It's been 2 to 3 weeks and they still haven't received it, and they're not sure what happened. This is where questions of, did I do something wrong? Maybe I should file again. And we want to reassure them if they received an accepted notification, it may just take some additional time. The first tool you can share with them is the Where's My Refund tool, just to make sure that the IRS is processing their tax return. After a return's been accepted, the IRS still has to process it to issue that refund. You can explain some common reasons a refund is delayed. So those common reasons, as I already mentioned, if an incorrect amount of advanced child tax credit or EIP3 was entered when filing the return, that goes through a different process to reconcile the correct amount. And that might mean that the refund has been adjusted. If that's the case, they'll receive a letter from the IRS. But again, it just may mean that it's going to take a bit longer. Another thing that we saw a lot last year was that a return was amended before the refund was processed. So let's say they filed really quickly to get their EITC or their stimulus payments, and then another W-2 came in the mail after they filed. They went ahead and amended that tax return. That's going to stop the entire process. So it's really important before somebody files to make sure they have everything they need in order to file an accurate tax return. Amending your return is not the ideal situation and should be only used when absolutely necessary. There also were the case that some additional identity validation was needed. So if somebody hasn't filed for a number of years, they may receive a letter from the IRS asking them to call to validate their identity. So if somebody is taking an unusual amount of time to get their refund, make sure they're keeping an eye out for any mail from the IRS. One way you can help is helping explain those IRS notifications. We will have a document that explains what are the IRS letters and what do they mean, and then what additional things may be, what additional steps may need to be taken in order to resolve any sort of outstanding issues. And next slide. Again, I recognize I have listed off a number of different things. All of them may seem confusing, overwhelming, and daunting. And I just want to give some space that that's completely normal to feel that way. Well, what I would recommend as far as getting started is, one, to note that pretty much everything that I mentioned in how to offer this assistance, none of it requires a specific certification or training, but additional training and resources are available to help you through these resources. So the first thing that I would encourage you to do is decide what types of assistance you want to offer. And you can add more as needed, but maybe start small, start with some things that you feel comfortable, that you are well positioned to do. If you work with a community organization that has a computer lab, maybe consider, again, just creating a space where somebody can file their own returns. If you have access to tablets and are well connected with low income and low to moderate income households, maybe you can help them through the Get Your Refund process using those tablets. All of those things could vary and differ depending on what your strengths are. The next would be to identify partners who are well equipped to meet these needs and are trusted in their communities. You're going to need to make sure that people are aware what you're offering and how to connect people to that. This is really best done in coalition and partnership with others in your community. I would say the next thing is to sign up for the Get Your Refund Navigator updates. I will put that link in the chat soon after I'm finished talking, but that link will give you the ability to share just some basic information about yourself. You can also request a unique URL so we can track the impact that you're making. But then that also signs you up for our newsletter to give you updates on when materials and trainings are available. Make sure whenever you're getting into this, you again just have a clear understanding of what you can and can't do. So what you can do is provide access to online tools and build trust and reassurance in process. That's basically all those things that I was describing can fit into that bucket. What you cannot do without any additional training or certification is provide tax advice. You're going to want to escalate those to the right people. Get Your Refund chat's a great option. Working with local Vita programs to make sure that they're getting those questions. LITCs, a number of other groups have that background. We really just want your help in accessing the online tools and, again, building that trust. And most importantly, familiarize yourself with available resources. None of what I said should be memorized today. I don't think it's very good to rely on memory for most of these things. It's good to be able to know where your resources are and how to use them. So we will have a Navigator page that has resources and modules to help you get through and better understand how to offer each of these services. And I can't say it enough, we have a chat feature on our website that helps connect you with IRS certified staff and volunteers. Whenever possible, work with your local Vita programs, LITCs, and existing outreach partners. Many partners have been doing this work for years and will most likely welcome the additional assistance that you may be able to offer. And then ultimately dive in. This is going to be a learning process. You're going to realize things along the way. That's why we're here as a community to support you in this process. With that, next slide. Oh gosh, I really put a lot into this, didn't I? No. One thing that I also just want to call out is just considering collecting additional metrics. So when requesting a unique URL, we can track what happens when they get to the Get Your Refund website for the most part. Were they successful? Did they file a return? Those types of things. What we can't measure are all of the things you're doing on the ground that may not result in something on Get Your Refund. So for example, when you help somebody acquire their tax documents, we can't track that. If you help somebody get an IP PIN, secure an ITIN, any of those things, that is a tremendous amount of support that we will not be able to reflect back to you in any kind of reports. So make sure you're taking note of that. And we'd love for you to share those metrics with us so we can better understand the work that's being done in your community. Next slide. Just some coming soon for our Navigator resource page. So just want to call out, we will have more information on setting up a File Myself station, setting up a Get Your Refund station, some post-filing assistance, some helpful handouts, all of those things will be available at getctc.org/navigators. If you look there right now, it's a lot of outdated information, but in the coming, quite honestly, days, it will continuously update with more and more information. All right, with that, I think I'm done.
Awesome. Thank you, Courtney. And thank you for taking the much more difficult role in today's presentation. I'm very lucky to have gotten to cover the easy parts. So I'm going to cover some of the outreach resources that we have available, and then we will have some time for question and answer. So the main outreach resource hub that we have is at taxoutreach.org/coronavirus. You can go there for our 2 EITC toolkits. So we have two toolkits. So we have an EITC and a CTC toolkit, and both toolkits have messaging and earned media materials, a social media toolkit that includes graphics as well as text that you can use, call and text scripts and newsletter copy, and a flyer and mailer. And so, as Courtney mentioned, we've really taken all of the learnings that we've had through the past couple of years of this pandemic and put all of those resources into this toolkit, and had it reviewed by many partners across the country. So we really feel like we've fine-tuned this messaging. So go ahead, use it any way you can, copy it, change it, do what you need to. Those resources are there for you to use. So I wanted to just quickly show what some of the flyer options look like. So we have here the EITC, the CTC, and our multi-tax credits flyer here. These flyers are being translated into different languages, and we do still need some community reviewers for that. Roxy's going to drop in the chat the different languages that they're being translated in. So if you can help with community review, please let us know, because we do need that. We want to make sure our translations are really good and people can use them. We do also wanted to show some of the graphics. So these are just a couple of the social media graphics you can use to promote the CTC, and then a couple of the social media graphics we have for the EITC. So with the EITC, because there is this newly eligible population of people between 19 and 24 and 65 plus, those who are not raising kids, we wanted to make sure we highlighted those populations in our graphics. And then one of the most exciting things that I'm so lucky to get to announce is that we are doing what we're calling Tax Time Thursdays. So every other Thursday, starting in a couple weeks, we'll be doing an informal learning session, and this will be going throughout the tax season. So we are still, getting those presenters and finalizing some of the details, but we will have the entire calendar of learnings available soon. So it will be short 10 to 20 minute presentations followed by 40 minutes of Q&A and all things taxes and navigation. And so we're reaching out to folks right now who can talk about peer-to-peer outreach, reaching foster and homeless youth, reaching older adults, reaching immigrants, those populations that we really don't want to miss out on these really important expanded tax credits. And so this registration will be coming out in the next few days. So please keep an eye out for that. We're just so excited that this will be available. And if you have ideas for things you might want to see, please let us know as well. And then before we turn into Q&A, I just wanted to quickly share, we can be reached by email or by phone at the Get It Back campaign and at Code for America. So if you do have any questions, please reach out, and we are sending the recording and the slides. So you don't have to write it down. You will get access to all of these slides and the information shortly. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Roxy Keynes, who's going to help moderate our Q&A, and I'm going to stop my screen.
All right, thank you so much, Jenny and Courtney, for a wonderful presentation. And thank you to all of you who have tuned in. You've asked a lot of great questions. There's also been a lot of appreciation in the chat as well. So thank you for that. We do have a lot of questions, so we'll see how many we can get through. We'll start with a couple for you, Jenny, about the topics that you shared. So first, with the Earned Income Tax Credit, could you explain a little bit more about who is eligible over 65 for the expanded EITC for workers without children?
Yes, so previously, if you were over 65, you could only claim the EITC if you were raising children and claiming them as qualifying children. But now with this expansion, if you're over 65, you can get the EITC for workers without children. So the rules are basically the same as anyone else in terms of income and eligibility and having an SSN. You just need to have income from a job if you were 65 and older to qualify. And even if you are retired or get Social Security benefits, you can still qualify if you have those earnings.
Thank you. And also on the EITC, could you explain again for people the rules for claiming a child and who needs to have a Social Security number? It seemed like there was a little confusion about that.
Sure, yeah. So I can actually reshare. I shouldn't have stopped the share. It didn't make sense to do that. I will just quickly go back to that page. So it was one for qualifying children?
Yes, hold on. Not that part, just the part on clarifying that everyone needs to have a Social Security number to get the EITC. So if a child does not have a Social Security number, they cannot be claimed for the EITC.
That's exactly right. Sorry, I was a little confused on the question.
I definitely answered that. So we have a couple of questions about the look back. First, is it correct that you must have earned income in 2021 to use the 2019 income for the EITC look back?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then could you share an example of how that works? I think what we can do is we'll follow up and share a link. We have a link on our website that includes some examples, so we can do that. So we'll hop over to some of these questions for Courtney because there were a lot that came in. So Courtney, could you share, there's a couple of questions related to people who are Vita partners. So one question, which I think you'd appreciate, how do people sign up to volunteer to do taxes for getyourrefund.org?
Oh my goodness. Sorry. I love when somebody's interested in volunteering. So if you want to just volunteer, or not just, if you want to volunteer for a Vita program specifically and work through them to help people prepare their returns virtually, all of those things, you can either try to locate your local Vita program or use an IRS website that gives you the opportunity to, sorry, I don't know why I'm messing this up so much, but basically sign up so that a local Vita program will contact you about how you can volunteer with them. If you're interested in volunteering directly with Get Your Refund, we are looking for volunteers to help in what we call an intake role, a greeter role, that is really just helping people through the initial stages of the virtual process of helping get their documents, understand the process, all of those things. And I will just put my email in the chat. I'm sure we have a sign up link somewhere, but I don't have access to that right now. But I'll put my email in the chat. If you're interested in volunteering with Get Your Refund, please feel free to email me and I'd be happy to connect you with our organizer team that's responsible for both organizing and training volunteers in that way.
Great. Okay, so another question. If a partner is using a unique URL to track referrals from their organization to Get Your Refund, what data can they expect to get back?
Yeah, and Annalise, I know you've been working, sorry, I lifted up my colleague Annalise Grimm to a panelist role so that she can help field some of these questions. Annalise, I don't know if you mind taking that question.
Sure, I can hop in. Hi, everybody. Really wonderful to be with you all today. Thank you for coming to the training. I'm Annalise Grimm, I'm the Associate Program Director for Tax Benefits at Code for America. So we're still in the process of building the dashboards that will provide data back to outreach partners who use unique URLs, and are hoping to do something pretty similar to what we did with Get CTC. So at a minimum, you'll be able to see the number of people who end up on our landing page, so like hits to our home website, the services that they end up choosing, so whether they went to DIY link or Get Your Refund or chose to sign up for Express. And then for the full service Get Your Refund virtual Vita tool, we can actually give you a lot of information on the funnel. So we can say this percentage of clients dropped off at this stage or that stage, and how many actually completed the process. And we can give you estimated dollar amount, that's your potential impact, that's based on the average amount of return that our clients are receiving. So you can get a good impact number for the number of clients that you are ultimately able to help file. We are a little bit more limited in the data we can provide about people who use our File Myself option. We can tell you how many people clicked on the link, and we have a general percentage of the number of people who click the link who complete the process, but we can't get that information on an individual basis because it comes from TaxSlayer. So we can give you sort of an estimated impact number there, but we can't tell you for sure whether it was your clients or just it's based on the sort of estimated typical client success with the tool. Happy to answer any more questions about that, but I'll turn it back over to you, Courtney.
I'll turn it back over to Roxy for the next question.
Okay, great. So we will switch back a little bit to Jenny. So there's a question related to the child tax credit. Could you explain the maximum phase out? I thought it was reduced by $2,000 if the income exceeded adjusted gross income.
I actually had to pull up our resource on taxoutreach.org because I don't remember these numbers myself. But so the CTC amount, it starts to phase out when you earn if you make 75,000 single, 150,000 for married couples, and $112,500 for head of household. So for every $1,000 of income you earn above that phase out rate, it reduces the CTC amount by $50. So hope that helps. And the website is a great resource because I don't remember these details either.
Great, thank you, Jenny. Okay, so we're going to get into a couple of more Get Your Refund questions. So one question for you, Courtney, is can people who are married filing separately use Get Your Refund?
Yes, they can. And so our income limitations don't differentiate by filing status. So we just sort of try to make it as easy as possible. That is not entirely true anymore now that we push people to express filing or these things. But generally speaking, for the full Get Your Refund virtual Vita service, we can help people who are married filing separately. It's important if you're doing married filing separately, we still need the Social Security number or ITIN number of the spouse you're filing separately from. That is just, that's a requirement of filing that tax return.
Great. And could you clarify just a bit? There are a couple of questions both in the Q&A and chat about the requirements for the Social Security cards. When do filers need a physical copy, and for which services do they need that for?
Great question. Happy to clarify. So in order to have the physical copy of a Social Security card or ITIN letter, that is a requirement of all Vita programs. So if you are being served by a Vita program, either through the virtual Get Your Refund service or going to an in-person Vita location, you will need to have a copy of your Social Security card for you and every member of your household. If you use the File Myself or Express options, you won't need a copy of the card. You'll just need to know the numbers.
Great. Hopefully that clarifies things for folks. And a specific question, if the Express Simplified Filing tool is not expected to be available until May, and you have someone who wants to claim their third stimulus check, but they otherwise wouldn't need to file taxes, can they go ahead and do the file yourself version? Is that fine to do right now?
They can use the file myself. However, and I just want to kind of, the procedures that give us, or the regulations that give us the ability to create a simplified filing tool, give us the ability to say, if you make less than the filing requirement, you do not have to report that income. My caveat, if somebody just needs to get their third stimulus payment and is using the file myself, if they made income during the year, they will need to report that income until simplified filing is available.
Okay, so that income cap of 12,500 or guideline, if someone made more than that, then they should file a full tax return. Got it. Okay. So we have another question about someone who helped someone use Get CTC at the end of 2021 to claim a missing stimulus payment. That person still hasn't gotten their payments. And so this person who's assisting them wants to know, what should they do? Should they continue to wait for the payments? And for how long should they wait before filing a 2021 tax return? And do they need to try to request the third stimulus payment again? Because the 2020 return has not been processed yet.
Okay, so I want to kind of break this down. So if they filed a Get CTC return and they got a notification that it had been accepted, my next kind of bit of advice is making sure that they've checked their mail for any IRS letters. We've, because of wonderful partners that made us aware of this, when they help somebody through Get CTC, it may have taken a month or two for them to receive a letter from the IRS saying that they needed further validation of their identity, which required a phone call or an in-person visit. So that's kind of my one piece of advice, is make sure, check your mail. You haven't, if there's any follow-up information needed in order to get that. The next bit, and it sounded like there was a little bit of confusion over which stimulus payment they had missed. So if they have not received any stimulus payments, so first, second, or third, distributed in 2020, 2021, I would really encourage them to go onto their Irs account. So that takes that ID.me process to see what payments have been issued. If the IRS is aware that they have not issued that. If they're just missing their third stimulus, they can file a 2021 tax return in order to claim that third stimulus. And that's how they would claim it, saying that they did not receive that third stimulus, they are due the third stimulus payment. If they are still missing their first and second, that is something that is going to have to take additional kind of intervention of working with the IRS to figure out what happened to those payments. How do we get access to it, especially if they already filed a 2020 tax return, or 2020 tax return. Sorry that was such a complicated question. There's just a few pieces there that changed the way I would answer it.
Yes, thank you so much for addressing that. And so there have been also a couple of questions about supporting immigrants and undocumented people. So could you just share a little bit about the services that are offered through Get Your Refund? Is anything different with the process if someone is undocumented?
Yeah, so if somebody is undocumented and they have an ITIN, so let's assume they've gone through the process in previous years to claim get an ITIN, they are able to use the Get Your Refund services just as anybody with a Social Security card would. Changes what credits they may be eligible for, but generally speaking, when we ask them to upload their ID documents, it gives them the option of a Social Security card or an ITIN letter. If they are new filers and they haven't gotten an ITIN acceptance or an ITIN number yet, they eventually on our website will be pushed to a virtual Vita service that is equipped to help somebody apply for an ITIN. Unfortunately, just for the next week or two, that service is not available. So if somebody comes in and they don't have an ITIN number, they reach a block, but we're working with our team to be able to make sure that they're routed to the right level of assistance so they can get it. One thing I do want to note is that while a virtual site can help apply for the ITIN, give them next steps, give them recommendations of where they can go to certify it, we strongly recommend for any ITIN applicant that they go to what is called a certified ITIN acceptance agent. I feel like I have that name somewhat incorrect, to certify their documents so that they're not mailing in their ID, some sensitive ID documents and go without it for potentially months. So just wanted to call that out.
Thank you. Yes, and it's the certified acceptance agent that can review the documents. And so one related question is that some people who have now gotten an ITIN, but before they were working and using a social security number that was not in their name, they're concerned about what to do if they're filing a tax return and it has an ITIN number on it and the W-2 shows a different social security number. Yeah,
so that's actually what we kind of expect when we're filing an ITIN return is when they have W-2s, it comes with a different social security number. And what we do in the tax software is mark that, the software already recognizes that this person has an ITIN and the taxpayer ID number is going to not match what that ITIN is because it needs to have, anyways, I'm making this more complicated. They do not have to worry about the fact that those two numbers don't match. It is something that Vita certified preparers are ready to help answer and to help somebody through that process. And it is absolutely expected. So whatever you can do in the field to reassure them that that is normal and expected, they should upload their ITIN, and that's the number that the return will be filed with. The income will match what's on the W-2 forms or other income statements.
Thank you. So we're going to give you a break for a minute and come back to Jenny. Jenny, in talking about the stimulus payments, could you specify the qualified alien categories and who is eligible to get the stimulus checks? Does it include DACA recipients and asylum seekers?
It does indeed. And that's funny. This kind of does feel like a pop quiz. I feel like I'm in high school again. So with that, it's really the taxpayer ID number that they have that matters here. So the tax filer just needs to have either, for the third stimulus check, the tax filer either has to have an ITIN or an SSN. And so as long as they have one of those numbers, they'll get the third stimulus check for anyone in the family so anyone in the household, right? So a dependent or a spouse or whoever who has an SSN number. So yes, you can get it with DACA.
Great, okay. And a question for anybody here. There's some questions about these IRS letters, both IRS letter 6419 and questions around IRS letter 6475. So for 6419, which is the letter that shares how much someone received in advanced child tax credit payments, someone is commenting that they are hearing about these incorrect letters and they want to know if someone gets one that is wrong, can you use your own record and file without getting a kickback?
Jenny, is it okay if I take this one? Because this is something we've gotten a lot. So if you get the letter, let's say you're working with a client and they get that letter and the numbers that are on that letter do not match what they've received. The first thing you want to do is try to help them to get onto their IRS account. The IRS account will have essentially what the IRS has recorded. This is what money has been sent. This is the money that should be reported on their tax return. If they still disagree with that number or aren't able to get online, if they put in the number that they anticipate, or if they say is the amount they received, their return will go into this kind of manual processing, and the IRS will probably go back and say exactly what they have on record. It will take a tremendous amount of effort and energy to argue with the IRS about what money was actually sent and when it was sent. We have been working with the IRS to try to understand what is the best advice to give clients. And generally speaking, if the client's information doesn't match the IRS's information on the IRS account, most likely it's going to be very hard for that client to prove that they received something different. So my advice, if I was working one-on-one with somebody and they were asking, okay, I'm sure, I think I only received $1,000 and the IRS is showing that they sent $1,500. It may take, the greater part of a year to try to get anywhere with the IRS of proving that they did not receive that money or the extra $500. And so I would encourage them, unless they have concrete proof that they can show that those amounts don't, and if they can get any legal assistance, either from LITCs or their own legal advice, then great. But if they cannot access that, then most likely they're going to lose that argument with the IRS. I know that is not a pleasant answer. I know that is, but that is just the heart-to-heart answer I would give somebody I was working with, that in order to get their refunds in any reasonable amount of time, it's best sort of to just agree with the IRS on the amount. I hate that answer, but that's how I would advise somebody if I was working with them.
Thank you for that. And we do have some additional comments in the chat. So not sure. Oh, I don't think we can unmute people. So just adding to what Courtney said, the tax return, it won't get kicked back, but it will get delayed, and you will have the opportunity to appeal their decision, but it will take a very long time, as Courtney's noted. So thank you so much. We have just a little bit of time left, so we are going to prepare to wrap up. I know that we didn't get to all of your questions, and we will discuss how we can follow up on the questions that we didn't get to answer at this time. So thank you again for your participation. In terms of resources, there were a couple of questions around resources, so we will be sharing with you all of our outreach resources from both of our organizations. We'll definitely let you know about how to participate in Tax Time Thursdays when that comes up. And if there's anything else that you need, you can reach out to us. Jenny and Courtney have shared their emails, and we'll also share our contact information in the follow-up. So is there anything that anyone wants to say in closing?
No, thank you so much for attending. Remember, please don't feel like you have to memorize everything that was shared during this. Even when you get the recording, use your resources. Jenny and I were both looking at resources to answer your question because it's just not safe to guess at this point. So thank you all so much for attending, and thank you so much for Center on Budget for just co-hosting this. Really appreciate this partnership.
And please do sign up for the Tax Time Thursdays. If you have more questions, we'll have a lot more Q&A time in those sessions. So we'll get to a lot more questions throughout the tax season.